Tattoo artists, what is your most, are you sure, tattoo you've been asked to do/have done? Story 1. Friend wanted angel wings tattooed on her back and asked me to go since I was the only person she knew with tattoos. We walked into a pretty well-known tattoo shop in LA, and she explains to the artist what she wants. As she explains, it gets even more elaborate, with the wings starting to decay the farther down the back they went, and the artist shows us some pretty sweet wings he'd done before. He explains how it will be done. He'd do the outline first, and after a few weeks she could come back, and he'd start the detail work. Fast forward to 3 days later, and she's topless lying on his chair/bed, and he's laying a stencil down. He asks her what other tattoos she has besides this one, and she tells him that this will be her first one. Tattoo guy's face drops instantly, and he starts saying how he's going to end up tattooing some of the most painful parts you could tattoo, the ribs mostly, and he asks if she can handle it. She says yes, and after a little more talking, it happens. She cannot take the pain at all. She's crying and gripping the cushion like she's about to pass out. Artist looks at me and his face reads like, is she really going to do this the entire time? After half an hour of tattooing with the occasional break, he says he can't deal with her screaming in the shop, so he stops. He had probably 10% of the outline done on the right wing. We leave with another appointment set so another person could re-help her with the tattoo and make it something smaller. I didn't go back, but she went with 2 female friends, and from what I heard, another 10 minutes of tattooing, she had a nice wave outline on her back. Going for an almost full back tattoo as her first tattoo, and a very cliche one. She's very lucky that the guy stopped, and she has a smaller one instead. Story 2. I was a shop girl, so it was my job to get everything set up for the tattoos. I had a couple come in and want each other's names tattooed on them. Okay, no problem. At this shop, we had a rule that anything involving words has to have the person sign a copy of the lettering to make sure everything is spelled correctly. So they write their names down, the artist draws up the lettering, and I give them copies to double-check spelling and sign off on it. The woman looks at the man's name, he wrote down his name to give to the artist, and says it's spelled wrong. We double-check, and that's how he spelled it, and he looks at it and says it's right, and they argue about this. I go back and look at how it's spelled on his ID, and sure enough, it's spelled wrong. So he decides maybe it is spelled wrong, and the artist redraws it. On all his paperwork, he had spelled his name wrong, the way he had written it for the artist. His name is pretty common. I think he just really didn't know how to spell his name. This was a couple probably in their late 20s, early 30s, with a few kids together. Story 3. I tattooed the F word on a woman's hip. She still loves it, but it makes me really uncomfortable when I think about her at the beach. I also had a friend want me to tattoo his girlfriend's name in Old English on his arm. I said no girlfriends. He was mad because I was his friend and should do it. I said that's exactly why I wouldn't do it. If they don't last, I'm still his friend. It's incredibly hard to tell someone you won't do their tattoo because their relationship might not last. Newsflash, he got our competitor to do the tattoo. Breaking news, they aren't together anymore. Another guy, when I first started out, wanted to get the Nazi hunter image. It's a cartoon guy clubbing a swastika. Even though it's an anti-racism image, he still would have looked like he had a giant swastika on his chest from 10 feet away and would spend the rest of his life explaining it. I decided to not do the tattoo. Story 4. I've tattooed a guy's current wife's name on him, in the same session covered up his previous wife's name, and he also showed me another different previous wife's name he had on him. He didn't want to cover that one though. She must not have been that bad. We also had this couple come in all the time to get tattooed at the first shop I worked at. The guy would come in sometimes with a side girl and buy her tattoos, sometimes with his fiancée. After they were married, his fiancée wanted me to tattoo their wedding date on her wrist. I felt really weird trying to talk her out of it while not feeling like it was my place to tell her about this guy's behavior. I ended up doing it for her, and a year later she came in to get a red line tattooed through the date. Story 5. We had this lovely exchange student come into the studio for about a year to get all sorts of piercings, and then the day finally came that he turned 18, so I asked to sit down and chat with him about what he wanted. Now, the way he asked me made me think that it was going to be this big, elaborate design. He asked for a maths equation on his foot. He wanted 3 + 4 = 8. I cautiously asked that he knew that this was the incorrect answer to the equation. His response was, "Oh, yeah, I know. I just think it'd make a funny tattoo." So yeah, that and another time I tattooed Scooby-Doo and Shaggy on a guy's bum cheeks. Have a photo if people are interested. Story 6. Guy came into the shop I worked at wanting a cover-up of a previous regrettable tattoo. Pretty normal until he casually mentioned it's on his willy, and it's a red rocket. None of the dudes in the shop wanted to cover it up or even see it. The only person who stepped up was one of the female artists. She was like, I don't think I have a willy tattoo for my portfolio, so frick it, let's cover it up. The only possible way to cover it up was to add so much black work, so she freehand drew a tuxedo onto his schlong. Dude ended up with a dapper willy, and he was happy with it. Weirdest day at work ever. Story 7. Was in booking a tattoo one day, and a woman came in to buy her soon-to-be 16-year-old daughter a tattoo. Owner and tattooist says, sure, we can sort something out. What is she wanting? Mother says, she wants to get the Playboy bunny on the inside of her wrist. Artist refused and said, I don't want to be responsible for something so cliché and visible on such a young girl. There was an argument, but the woman leaves yelling, she's going elsewhere where her money is good enough. He had strong views on neck, face, and hand tattoos. Didn't stop him from doing a fast food character orgy on a guy back, though. Story 8. A man came into the shop my husband works at on his 18th birthday and got a pentagram with a goat on the front of his throat. First tattoo in a very visible spot that is satanic. I don't know that kid, but I'm pretty sure he's regretting that decision. My husband refused to do this tattoo, but someone else in the shop did. On another note, my white trash biological father had "Let's Frick" tattooed on his hands when he laced his fingers together. I never knew what they said when I was a kid. I finally realized at his funeral. I'm pretty sure he got it in prison. Story 9. A guy came in and got his wife's name covered up with a portrait of his new girlfriend. My coworker used part of her shirt in the picture to cover up the name. Then 2 months later, he turned his now ex-girlfriend's portrait into a demon. I started working at another shop, and the same guy came in with a third girl, and they were getting matching tattoos on their hands. When I walked to the front and saw him, he totally pretended he didn't know me. Third time lucky. Story 10. Guy comes in with girlfriend, wants each other's names. I protest, they insist. We know they'll get it elsewhere, and I'm in a walk-in shop at the time. So I say, frick it, let's go. Gets it across his stomach in Old English. The moment we're done, she yells some like, next time you'll think twice before effing some skanky witch behind my back, and runs away. It was awkward to ask for the money. That is some of the best revenge I've ever heard. Story 11. Dude came in and asked me to tattoo a portrait of his girlfriend, only the portrait was a duck-face Snapchat selfie. I jokingly suggested adding her holding the phone, taking the selfie, but he thought it was a great idea. They've only been dating 6 months, and he didn't tell her he was going to get it. He came back a month later to add her name above it. Should have added her Snapchat username. What a plebe. Story 12. I actually refused to do this one. An 18-year-old girl came in wanting her boyfriend's name on her lower back. She had never met him. She was his prison pen pal for a month, and he was being released in a couple weeks, and she wanted to get it to surprise him. No judgments on ex-cons or 18-year-old girls, but I got the impression the relationship wasn't going to last. That's what Sharpie is for. Story 13. A friend of mine had the anorexia symbol tattooed on her neck. I know it's supposed to be a symbol of recovery. I think. It's hard to say with all the pro-Anna stuff, but now when she looks in the mirror, all it does is remind her of her disorder and how horrible it makes her feel. You should recommend getting a cover-up tattoo if that makes her feel that bad. Story 14. My artist told me a story about a guy who was balding and wanted his bald spot tattooed over in black. My artist colored the bald spot in with a Sharpie and told the guy to come back after he'd shown it to his wife. Guy didn't come back. One of the artists at a shop here has the word hair tattooed on his bald spot. Much better idea. Story 15. Asked my artist, 25 plus years experience, this during my last piece. His most notable was a guy who wanted a solid bright blue Speedo tattooed on. Over every square inch that a Speedo would cover. Said it was super awkward as it was one of his first tattoos, but he made good money off of it. Nothing has really fazed him since. Story 16. Last year, while doing a guest spot in Portugal, I had a guy come in while he was on holiday for his stag party. The guy wanted all the names of his friends tattooed on his butt cheeks. 13 names on each cheek, and 3 of his mates wanted to sign their own names. Sure, buddy, sure. Story 17. There was an 85-year-old woman who came into my tattoo artist shop saying exactly, "I want a freaking skull with freaking daggers and fire." My artist said, "Freak, yeah." And now she's an 85-year-old grandma with skull and daggers on her chest. Story 18. My ex-tattooist tried to convince me to get a broken condom with the word "whoops" above it. Obviously, I declined. He ended up tattooing it on his own upper arm with his son's birthday below. Story 19. Some guy came in and told me he wanted a picture of Monica Lewinsky on his lower stomach. I swear to God, that guy is regretting it right now. There is no way he isn't. That's insane. Story 20. I have a friend with the Ice Age squirrel tattooed on his inner thigh, reaching for his nuts. You're in the wrong thread, friend, because that tattoo sounds amazing. Story 21. Mate had to tattoo a picture of Bill Cosby to a dude's back in the mid-2000s. Poor guy probably regrets that now. Zip zap zoobity bop. Story 22. I know this guy who tattooed a cutie mark on a guy's butt. A cutie mark is the marking the ponies have on their rear in the My Little Pony series. Story 23. One of my dad's friends got a Gary Glitter tattoo back when he was popular, regretting that big portrait of a pedo on his arm now that he's 60. Story 24. An artist at the local tattoo parlor I go to tattooed a guy's ballsack all orange with a scary face on it. The guy referred to it as a sack-o'-lantern. Story 25. My tattoo artist said some dude on crack came in asking for Lisa Simpson nude in a very sensual position. Told him to F right off. Story 26. Guy came in and asked for a bottle of sriracha with little wings tattooed on his back. Please leave your stories in the comments. I'd love to make a video of them in the future. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe.